Hey, good morning. I'm in the woods, only for a bit because the woods are the fastest way to get to the next electric bicycle. Today I'm going to take you out. It's Sunday the 12th. It's a beautiful day. And I'm going to take you somewhere, well, I haven't shown you before. In fact, I'm going to take you to the most pro-Trump area of Washington, D.C. Now remember, Washington, D.C. voted for Biden 92%. But I'm going to take you to the one small corner where Trump actually got into double digits. Is that a mushroom? That's a big, big mushroom. Look at that. Kind of swampy back here. All right, we're gonna get there. I promise you, we will find it. Hey guys, we're on Massachusetts Avenue, which I think is actually the longest street in DC. It stretches from northwest border all the way down to the southeast border, going through Embassy Row in between. We are making our way up on an electric bike, and we're heading into upper northwest DC. But we're gonna stop and see a few cool things on the way. So up here we've switched over now to Nebraska Avenue, is the old Navy transmission towers, which is now part of Homeland Security. This is actually a rather major facility for Homeland Security, though for most of its time it was a U.S. Navy communications base up here in upper northwest Washington, D.C. There you can see the anchors at the gates here at Nebraska Avenue of this former Navy base, turned Homeland Security outlet. Now, Homeland Security, as I showed you the other day, is moving to a former insane asylum, the St. Elizabeth's in southeast DC, but I'm not sure if they're going to give up this property or give it back to the Navy. Kind of doubt it. This is the Ambassador of Japan's house, and it sits back on several acres. It's probably the size of their embassy, to be honest. I don't even know if I can see it. It's so hidden in trees and so private. But this is where the Ambassador of Japan will entertain congressmen, lobbyists, visitors from Japan, etc. Oh, here we go. We should get a good view. This last clearing of trees, maybe. Maybe not. So this is the ambassador's house, is back there behind these trees. But down here to the left is WRC TV, the NBC affiliate for Washington, D.C. And I'm not sure if they're still here. These used to be some of their towers they used to share. Now, this is where NBC would do, like, what's their program? Meet the Press or something like that? They would film it here. They would do all their other nightly news anchoring type stuff from Washington would be done up here at WRC. But in 1955, there was an advertisement that went out for someone who knew something about puppets. Oh, here it is, WRNBC. Yeah, so 1955, an ad went out, we need help, someone to do a puppet show. So this University of Maryland freshman said, yeah, I know how to make puppets. I did it a lot when I was in high school, and now I'm in college. And they said, okay, well, why don't you come out, pitch us something? He says, well, I got this idea for a show called Sam and Friends. They're like, all right. And they're like, well, who's it going to star? And he's like, well, I made this puppet out of my mom's green coat and a couple of ping pong balls. So that puppet eventually became known as Kermit the Frog. And Kermit the Frog got his start right here at NBC WRC in Washington, D.C. Jim Henson was a student from Maryland at the University of Maryland, and he got his start making a TV show for this station, and one of his first characters eventually became Kermit the Frog. But apparently at first they weren't even sure if he was a frog or a lizard. But anyway, this was basically the birthplace of Kermit the Frog. All right, let's spin down this way and see what fun we can see. So over here you see some artsy-fartsy things, and that means museum or art center, or more appropriately, University Art Center, because this area up here is a university. This is the American University here in Washington, D.C. This is a 4-year undergrad degrees. I think they even have a college. They have a law school and some other graduate programs. And there are a lot of students up here. Just not Sunday morning when they're all hungover. Maybe we'll spin through campus. Now, at one time, there was actually a building here called the Adnan Khashoggi Center. Adnan Khashoggi was an arms dealer implicated in Iran-Contra, but he had donated money for a building here, so there was actually an Adnan Khashoggi Center. Now, they got rid of that. And let's go spin through campus a little bit. I think there's a quad over here on my left. Yeah, I believe this building back here was the Adnan Khashoggi Center before they renamed it. Yeah, here we go. Let's go into the more campus-like environments. Now the students have just come back about a week or two ago. So this place was actually really, really quiet last year. There were very few students on campus. Everybody was taking classes virtually. But now they're bouncing around again. It's kind of crazy again. This is a new building since I was last year. There's quite a few international students here. This is the School of International Service. So I guess that's kind of like the American Foreign Service type school. That's a big degree program at Georgetown, for example, the School of Foreign Service, where future diplomats go. All right. That's a beautiful old church. National United Methodist Church. All right, let's spin down this way. Yeah, down here at the end on the corner here is, I believe, the ambassador of Korea's house. So this is the Korean ambassador's place. It's pretty huge. It goes all the way down. I don't know, that must have been the driveway. This must be the main entrance over here. Yeah, so this is the Korean ambassador's home. Here to the stop. Try to get you a photo. There's a lot of trees. Maybe you should come back in the winter. So this is the Korean ambassador's house. This is paid for by the Korean government. This is given to their ambassador. The U.S. government only provides external security if there is a threat out here on the street, which I'm gauging I'm not a threat. Alrighty. There you can see the Korean flag. And a little bit more. Like I said, we'll come back in the winter time, and then we can see the house a lot better. Now, there's an interesting house, or soon-to-be house down here, 4825. Let's see if we can find it. I think it's on the right. Yeah, here it is. Boy, squeak. Yeah, see this big fence? Now, if you came here about 10 years ago, it would have looked like E.T. Remember the scene in E.T. when they covered the house with plastic? That's what happened. 4825 Glenbrook. And the reason that 4825 Glenbrook is no longer here is because this was a chemical weapons dump. During World War I, American University ceded all of this land to the U.S. Army for use as a chemical weapons testing facility. And this area over here was filled with mustard gas. In fact, this entire neighborhood has been tested for mustard gas and arsenic exposure. This house here was found to be so contaminated that they just destroyed it. Now, as you can see from the neighboring houses on this street, that was not that was not an inexpensive proposition to destroy a house like that. I mean, some of these houses have their own creeks, their own private bridges for driveways, like this one. This neighborhood is known as Spring Valley, and Spring Valley is the only precinct in DC, well, not the only, but the most pro-Trump precinct in Washington, DC. In the 2020 elections, Donald Trump took almost 19% of the vote of the residents here. So 19% of this neighborhood voted for Donald Trump, making it the most pro-Trump area of Washington, D.C., a city that voted 92% for Joe Biden, and overall only 5% for Donald Trump. So I thought, though, I'd take you up here because, well, there are some really nice houses, and it is quite a pretty area. Now, this area on my right, where all these houses are, is at the intersection of like 49th and Sedgwick Street. That was known as Mustard Park. The Army called that area Mustard Park because of all the mustard gas that had blown up in that area. That's quite pretty. Now today, well, it's not really Mustard Park anymore. Now, when you go house hunting in this area, it's actually kind of interesting. You get like the standard disclosures about lead paint, plumbing, yada yada, but then you'll get this like 10-page U.S. Army Corps of Engineers document explaining how much mustard gas they believe was in your area, buried in the ground. It's like, this area is certified mustard gas free. It's like, okay, that's a very interesting disclosure to find in your house hunting documents. Yeah, so this area right here, this was known as Mustard Park. Not quite a park anymore. Now, we've crossed over into a new neighborhood. This area is called AU Park, American University Park. This is not as expensive as Spring Valley, but it's still quite a nice neighborhood. Nice little community, young families, college professors, a few students, not too many. But AU Park is one of the slightly more affordable areas just north of AU University. In fact, it's so affordable that at one time a senator lived down here. A senator you may have heard of lived right over here at 4801 Tilden Street. Let me show you that house. It's a 4-bedroom house, the white one that you see right there, 4801 Tilden. And this house was bought by a senator from California, Senator Richard Nixon. Now, you know, senators lived all over the city. What became interesting is when they looked at the documentation, it turns out Richard Nixon had signed a racially restrictive covenant banning the sale of this house to African Americans, Jews, Persians, and a whole bunch of others. You see, this was a very segregated area. In fact, it was built and marketed as an area where you could be safe from the corrupting influences of the big city, or something to that effect. I actually saw the marketing material back from the 30s. But when Richard Nixon bought his house, he actually signed the racially restrictive covenant, and he took a tremendous amount of flack when that was later disclosed. But this is another American University building. That used to be their law school, and then they moved to another part of town. But that's not what I wanted to show you. I wanted to come over here. Big bump. Because back up here is a grocery store. A tiny little grocery store that serves this general area. Wagshall's Market. All right, it used to be called Wagshall's Deli. It still has a deli here. And this is known as the deli for the presidents. You see, a lot of presidents really like Wagshall's. Bush used to come here, Clinton used to come here, Ford, etc. This is the deli to the presidents. It is the deli that has actually made sandwiches that have been served in the White House, for little events and stuff. And Wagshall's Market is up here in this corner of Washington, D.C., and it serves the people in this community sandwiches and other market goods. Okay, so now we're up by Nebraska and Wisconsin Avenue in a neighborhood known as Tenleytown. This is kind of where the college kids come to get on the subway when they want to go back into the rest of the city. It's not that far from campus. It's far enough they have a shuttle bus, but not so far they can't stumble back here. This, on the other hand, is Engine Company number 20, and this is a really old historic firehouse. But, like I said, the operative word was old. You can see these doors. There's no way a modern fire truck could fit. So what they did is they added an extension just a couple years ago. Now, they had to go through 7 layers of hell with the architecture and historical people to try to get that, but the alternative was to have basically no fire station. So they approved it, and now the fire trucks are in there, and then the ambulance and chief, they're docked over in the old station. Kind of a cool use of an old building, repurposed for modern conveniences. Alrighty, let's spin down Wisconsin. Now, this building over here, this little black building, it is not an embassy. I repeat, it is not an embassy. It is an economic and trade office for Taiwan. Taiwan Economic and Cultural Representatives Office in the United States. So what do? Basically the same functions as an embassy, but we don't recognize them as an embassy. Here's a map of Taiwan, by the way, in flowers. The United States does not recognize Taiwan, and vice versa, but both countries maintain rather extensive economic and cultural offices in the other countries' capitals to coordinate things like trade and military sales and whatnot. But it's not an embassy. Up there you see a lacrosse pitch and an old modern school building. And over here you see the entrance and administrative headquarters of the Sidwell Friends School. Now, Sidwell Friends is one of the top private schools in the DC area, and this is where Chelsea Clinton went to school. It's also where the 2 Obama daughters attended school. So Sidwell Friends is up in this neighborhood in Washington, D.C. It's one of 3 or 4 extremely elite private schools in this part of town. The others being the Cathedral School, St. Alban and NCS, Sidwell, and then the Georgetown Day School, all of which are about a mile apart. So all 3 of the top privates are just on this road. Guys, you're at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., where I believe a service is taking place to remember the fallen firefighters and first responders from 9/11. The D.C. Fire Department is out here with a giant flag, and out on the grounds are the names and the faces of the fallen. Hundreds of first responders were lost on that day, but they're being remembered today.